Hi guys, welcome back to Crime and Wine. My name is Ariana, or Ari to the YouTube fam, and most of the time I cover true crime cases that have inspired the making of movies, but we've recently branched out to everyday crime cases that I find interesting and I want to share with you guys. So today we're going to be looking into a very horrendous and sad case, and viewer discretion advised because we are going to get into some talk about child abuse, but I will give you guys a little bit of a warning before we get into the details. But without further ado, grab your wine and let's get into today's case. On February 12, 1993, 10-year-olds John Venables and Robert Thompson abducted 2-year-old James Bulger from a mall, and within hours of that surveillance image being captured on that afternoon, James would be brutally tortured to death. On February the 12th, John and Robert made their way to New Strand Shopping Center in Bootle, which is near Liverpool. It was a busy day at the mall, and the two boys had wandered from shop to shop, stealing anything that they could get their hands on, and then tossing their stolen goods down escalators just for the fun of it. Apparently, on this day, inside a TJ Hughes department store, a woman noticed that two boys were trying to get her kids' attention. And moments later, her 3-year-old daughter and 2-year-old son were missing. The mother quickly found her daughter, but there was no sign of her son. So, of course, she frantically started to ask her daughter where her son was, and all she could say was, "Gone outside with the boy." And the woman began calling for her son, and she would run outside, where she would find Venables and Thompson beckoning the boy to follow them. When Venables saw the mother, they told the boy to go back to her, and then they just took off. Venables and Thompson were loitering around a snack kiosk, hoping to steal candy, when they noticed James Bulger by the door of a nearby butcher shop. With Bulger's mother, Denise, momentarily distracted, they got the toddler to come with them. They had spirited him out of the Strand and began the long walk across Bootle and Walton to a railway line where they had a den on the embankment. They were seen by 38 people, most of whom did nothing, probably believing, and I guess understandably, that no horror could be committed by such young little boys. Some even thought that James was just their little brother. The crazy part about this, though, is that some witnesses would later say that Bulger looked distressed, and some even saw the older boys punch and kick the 2-year-old. One article I read said a woman saw Thompson punch James and shake him, but she pulled her curtains and blocked out the scene. And another time, a woman had approached the boys because they said that James was hurt and distressed, and the boys told her that they had found him like that at the bottom of a hill. Apparently, they were all satisfied with their explanation. The woman simply told the two boys to take the toddler down to the nearby Walton Lane police station. She called out to them once more as they walked away, but the boys never looked back at her. She was concerned, but another woman said that she had heard James laughing moments ago, and so both assumed nothing was wrong. Later that night, one of the women saw the news that Bulger was missing, and she phoned the police and expressed regret for not doing something. Not long after the elderly woman sent the boys on their way, Bulger was almost rescued. Yet again, a woman concerned for the toddler told Venables and Thompson that she would take the child to the police station herself. But when she asked another woman nearby to look after her daughter while she did that, that woman refused because her dog did not like children. And so Bulger slipped away from safety once again. Venables, Thompson, and Bulger then walked into 2 different stores where they interacted with both shopkeepers who, though suspicious of the older boys, let them go. Then Venables and Thompson came upon 2 older boys that they knew, and these boys asked who the toddler was, and Venables replied that he was Thompson's brother and that they were taking him home. Guys, this is so crazy. I mean, I'm not sure what I would think or how exactly I would react, because the truth is, most often you wouldn't think 2 10-year-old boys could be responsible for something so evil. But then again, on another note, I'd probably think that maybe these kids just shouldn't be wandering around town alone, because I'd be scared something could happen to all of them, which they're kids, which is a bit ironic, I guess. but maybe this was just a completely different time and people responded differently. I don't know, but what do you guys think? At the canal, they even dropped James on his head and left him on the ground crying. A woman had been passing by at that time and noticed James and still did nothing. Venables and Thompson then called for Bulger to come and follow them, and he did. And by now, his forehead had been bruised and cut, causing Venables and Thompson to pull the hood of the toddler's sweater over his head to try and hide the injury. The following is graphic content, so please feel free to skip or exit out from this video now because it's graphic child abuse. It was said that they went on a 2.5-mile walk that took just over 1 hour and 15 minutes to complete. Venables and Thompson had bought blue paint that they had stolen from the shopping mall and splashed it in Bulger's left eye. They then kicked him, pummeled him with bricks and stones, and stuffed batteries into his mouth. Finally, the boys hit Bulger over the head with a 22-pound iron bar, which resulted in 10 skull fractures. All in all, Bulger sustained 42 injuries to his face, head, and body, and he was so badly battered that authorities later concluded that there was no way to tell which injury represented the fatal blow. Eventually, Venables and Thompson placed Bulger's dead body across the train tracks in hopes of making the whole thing look like an accident, and abandoned the scene before a train came along and ended up severing the toddler into two. On Sunday, February 14, 1993, James Bulger had been missing for 2 days at this point when a young boy rushed into Walton Lane Police Station and announced a body had been found on the railway tracks. It was less than 150 yards from the back of the police station. On the first day of James' disappearance, the police and security staff worked through the night at the Strand shopping center to sift through the CCTV footage where they would find that 2 boys could be seen with James. One boy was holding James's hand, and they were all heading towards the exit and the direction of the Leeds-Liverpool canal. They would spend the following day doing everything they possibly could to find him. Patrol cars had been used with loudspeakers, press conferences had been called appealing for the 2 boys in the Strand shopping center to come forward, and a manhunt was underway, searching the nearby canals and wasteland areas before they would find the horrific scene from the witness. After James's murder, emotions among the Liverpool community were running high. On the bank close to where his body had been found, hundreds of flowers were placed by the local community. And at this time, the only leads the police had to go on were the grainy images from the Strand revealing James's abduction, so they needed to heavily rely on the public support for any potential witnesses that could identify the 2 boys, which, as we all already know, dozens of people saw little 2-year-old James with the 2 10-year-old boys. It's pretty sad because on Tuesday, February 16th, they arrested a young boy, and of course it's breaking news. However, neighbors who seen the police arrived jumped to the wrong conclusion, believing that he was guilty, and a near riot almost broke out. The level of anger that someone could commit such a brutal and savage murder outraged the Liverpool community. Soon, though, the innocent boy and his family were ruled out of the inquiry, but they were forced to move away. Finally, a woman who saw the grainy images from the Strand had recognized the 2 individuals as Robert Thompson and John Venables, who were known troublemakers, and after a quick check of the school register, it had proved that they had ditched school the day that James Bulger went missing. On Thursday, February 18th, the police acted on this information, and in plain clothes, policemen in unmarked cars were sent to arrest them. It's said that the police were absolutely astounded by their young age and small stature that the police were so certain that the boys that they just arrested couldn't be who they were looking for. They strongly believed that the children just couldn't be capable of such a crime. The lead detective at the time, Detective Superintendent Albert Kirby, actually dismissed the boys as the murderers, but he still wanted to question them. Kirby believed that they had to be looking for teenagers, so in a desperate bid for more information, he ended up asking Crime Watch Daily to help. The program was to be broadcasted on Thursday, February 18th, which had made it the first time in the program's history that an appeal would be launched in the same week that the murder had been committed. During the broadcast, police released newer and better enhanced images of the two boys, hoping that someone would be able to identify the two individuals, but what the police failed to realize at the time was that the two suspects they were searching for were already in their custody for questioning, though. When the young boy Venables found himself alone with his parents, it's at this point that he just couldn't take anymore, and he began to break down and confess to being involved in the murder. The police were listening to everything, and with this revelation, they now started to interrogate Thompson, although he refused to admit that he was guilty in James's death. But by this time, the police felt that they had enough evidence against both kids, and on Saturday, February 20th of 1993, the boys were charged with the abduction and murder of James Bulger. The police were entering new territory with this investigation, as no one had ever interviewed child murder suspects before, and to ensure that their testimonies would stand up in court, it was important that the two boys understood the implications of telling lies and telling the truth, and knowing the differences between right and wrong. So they asked specific questions to prove these facts, which they both passed. So the questioning continued. Both young boys had their mothers present along with legal representation. It's then that both of the boys coped very different with the police questioning, with Venables acting his age, which he was hysterical and extremely scared of the investigators, and he kept revealing his deep-rooted fears of being sent to prison. Thompson, on the other hand, was very controlled and mostly composed throughout the whole process. Of course, as you can probably guess, that the boys kept trying to blame each other for everything. The trial was absolutely crazy because on February 22nd of 93, the two boys appeared at the South Sefton Magistrates Court in Bootle to face their charges. They pled not guilty, and a crowd of 300 people gathered outside, and as the vans were leaving, a riot broke out, but it turned out that the vans were actually decoys, but it did raise the questions of what would have happened if the crowd had got a hold of one of the defendants. I think it's understandable just how angry the community was over this senseless and vile murder. The authorities had really underestimated the public's anger, so they ended up relocating the trial to Preston, and the trial began on November 1st at Preston Crown Court. It's so sad because Denise and Ralph Bulger, who were the parents of James Bulger, announced at this time that they were expecting another baby, but Denise refused to come to the court. She was adamant that she did not want to sit in the same vicinity as James's killers, and one article I read said that to this day there are still certain details of the case that she's unaware of, which is completely understandable. During the trial, the prosecution wanted to make it clear to the jury that they didn't need to rely on Thompson and Venables' version of events simply because of how many witnesses had seen the boys with James, and that in itself it basically created a timeline of events of what had happened. The witnesses, of course, all blamed themselves for not interfering, and the forensic evidence submitted to the jury was very vital to convicting the two boys. Graham Jackson, a home office forensic scientist, matched blood samples from James to the blood found on child B's shoe, which, by the way, in order to protect the young boys' identity, they referred to the boys as child A and child B during the trial. So this forensic scientist went on to say that there was a 1 in a billion chance of it being an error. Philip Ryder, another forensic scientist, was able to match the pattern of bruising on James's right cheek with features of the upper part of a shoe worn by child A. They were black brogues that had distinctive stitching and an unusual arrangement of lacing rings. Light blue paint marks had been discovered on James's hair, shoes, and underpants. The same light blue paint marks were also found on child A and child B's clothing, including their jackets, pants, and shoes. Andy Millay, a forensic scientist, pointed out to the jury that a paint mark on child B's sleeve might well have been James's small handprint. After hearing 3 weeks of evidence, the jury were asked to deliver their verdict, and on November 24, 1993, taking just 6 hours, the jury found both Thompson and Venables guilty. Mr. Justin Morland sentenced them to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure for a minimum of 8 years and would say that Robert Thompson and John Venables, the killing of James Bulger, was an act of unparalleled evil and barbarity. Outside the courthouse, people called for the blood of James Bulger's killers, and they would yell and say, "A life for a life." Popular disgust only intensified when witnesses and the media noted Thompson's cold, seemingly remorseless behavior at trial compared with Venables' hysterical outbursts. It was widely assumed that Thompson was the instigator, even though psychiatrists and authorities have never been able to reach a conclusion on the boys' motives. Both of the boys only served 8 years in prison and released when they turned 18. Unfortunately, there's still a bit more to cover on this case, and it's unsettling. In 2010, Venables was imprisoned for downloading images depicting various kinds of sexual abuse being inflicted upon male toddlers. He became eligible for parole in 2013, which at the time, Ralph Bulger, again this was James's father, told the parole board that he couldn't forgive his son's killers and that Venables should not be released. Nevertheless, Venables was released, but in November of 2017, John Venables was again imprisoned when more child abuse images and pedophile manual that provided instructions on having sex with kids was discovered on his computer. John Venables was sentenced to 3 years and 4 months in prison, not far from the amount of time that he served for joining Robert Thompson in perpetrating the murder of James Bulger a quarter century before. But Thompson, on the other hand, is believed to be assimilating back into society and living a quiet life. With all that being said, I know that was just a terrible case to have heard. It's so sad what happened to this innocent 2-year-old little boy, and to think that it was 2 10-year-old kids that committed such a heinous crime. It's just completely outrageous, but definitely leave your thoughts and comments below. Let me know who you think might have been the instigator between the 2 boys, how you feel about their sentencing time that they got, and yeah, leave any thoughts that you have down below. But as always, thank you guys for joining me back here for another episode of Crime and Wine, and I'll see you guys back here next week.